Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now.
Let's get into this, man. Just right now, I was watching the weigh-ins for this weekend's
Yeah.
fight, right? And your former opponent, Charles Jourdain, his opponent missed weight, and and his reaction, man, it was pretty crazy, man. Have you had people miss weight on you?
Yeah. Hakeem Dawodu missed weight by 3 pounds. Steven Peterson also missed weight by 3 pounds as well. But I was happy with it. Hakeem Dawodu, I got 30% of his purse. I got 30% of Steven Peterson's purse. Plus, I got fight of the night with Steven Peterson, so I got his $50,000. So I was more than happy with him missing weight at the time.
Yeah, but like that I mean that is like kind of like special circumstances, I guess, to get paid in that way. But like for missing weight, I mean, like they're taking 30%. Do you think that should be higher? And also some people are talking about like, hey, if the fight still continues, there should be like a point deduction in each round.
Oh
What do you
man,
think of those?
that's originally been. I mean, I don't know who else has been saying that, but I've always had that as an idea in my own head, and I've told people this, countless times, even on interviews, that I think that it should not only be a financial thing, but it should be a point deduction, at least for the first round, because these refs are taking points away from, unintentional eye pokes, if there's a couple of them, or unintentional, kicks to the groin. And sometimes if it seems a bit more intentional, they'll take it right out the gate. And I feel like for me, it's a bigger advantage if you show up missing weight, because if a guy's missing by 2-3 pounds, that could possibly be like up to like 5 or 6 the next day, because it multiplies, because they're so drained, and a couple pounds on weighing day can equal to 2 or 3 times more. Plus, they didn't have to cut down as hard as the other guy might have, and so, or he might not have worked as hard. Sometimes these weight cuts or these weight misses are like strategic. Even the Kelvin Gastelum one, it's like they waited to the day before. It's like, you knew you were gonna make weight, Kelvin. You have a pod, or you have a show where you go out. It's called Calvin Missing Weight, and he's eating a bunch of bullshit. Like, come on, man. You knew you were gonna miss the weight, and it's kind of disrespectful that he did that to D-Rod. I train with D-Rod. I mean, we're completely different weight classes, but he's at the same gym I'm at. Nice guy, and he means well. And yeah, like he was like not even 180 pounds. Leading into the weigh-ins, he was like 179, and he cuts like 9 to 10 pounds. And Kelvin couldn't even make 180. He said so. They ended up doing it at 186, and then obviously Kelvin just big boyed him. The whole time. I think it was a pretty even fight altogether, besides the takedowns and the control, because Kelvin was probably about close to 20 pounds heavier than him in the cage, because D-Rod was underneath middleweight, and I bet you Kelvin was probably 15, 20 pounds heavier than middleweight the day of the fight. So you got to take that into consideration as well. That's such a big advantage, and I think when people do that, you should take a point away from them at least, to even it out. And if it's like something that's an insane amount of weight, then you just don't have the fight happen. They just forfeit or something. But the fact that like you have one guy that's doing all the work that needs to be done, and the other guy misses weight for that advantage, and sometimes when it becomes like a strategic thing, I don't think it's as punish. I don't think we punish the guys as much as we should, because some guys will just be like, all right, I'll forfeit the 20% or the 30% to try to get my other check, because I'm going to feel better and be bigger. And they actually, the statistic is that like 80% of guys who miss weight end up winning the fight, and it's probably because of that.
Yeah, man, that's right, man. Speaking of missing weight, your upcoming opponent, Christian Rodriguez, he's now, I guess he's at featherweight. He started at bantamweight, missed weight a few times. The skill set, fighting style, what do you think of it?
I think he's one of those guys who's like, he's kind of like me in a sense, where not very like specifically great at anything, but good all around. Got good cardio, good striking, good grappling, good wrestling. But yeah, like you said, he had to move up to featherweight because he was missing weight so many times. And so even though he's 4-1 in the UFC, there's kind of an asterisk by that, because a couple of those fights he missed weight pretty big. Even though he beat a guy like Raul Rosas, who had a lot of steam behind him. he missed weight by 5 pounds. That's huge at 135. You know, that's a lot of weight to be missed at that weight class. And then he did it against Simon, I think, as well. And then that last fight he had at featherweight against Algerian. I don't know how he won that fight. After those first 2 rounds, it was possibly 20-17, and for them to give him a split decision win makes kind of no sense to me. I mean, obviously Dalgarian kind of gave up in the third, but I think everybody was going into that fight or going into the third round thinking that C-Rod needed a finish to win that fight, and he didn't get the finish. So, but somehow got the split decision. But that's also, that also goes back to not letting the fight go to the judges, because these judges are making huge mistakes like every single fight night.
Yeah, it's become like a disease or something, right? Like with these judges, it's just like spreading.
It's such a weird thing. It's like that Dave Torelli. Like, I think his name's Dave Torelli. He's one of the judges that had gotten it like completely wrong. And there was a split decision against. It was when Sean Strickland just won his last fight against Costa, but it was a split decision. But it was like, that wasn't a split decision. But Dave Torelli had it for Paulo Costa, and then the very first fight of that night, it was Mitch Rapasso, I think, versus some Brazilian guy, and it was a split decision when clearly the Brazilian guy won at least 2, if not all 3 rounds, and Dave Torelli had to go to the other guy. And it's like, bro, when someone's missing the mark so many times, if I miss the mark 2 or 3 times in the UFC, they'll just cut me. It's like these judges need to have the same kind of repercussions, because they're putting not only like our careers on the line, but our paychecks, our livelihood, everything that goes into it is on the line when it goes to the judges. And if these guys can't even get some of these simple decisions right, it's like, I don't know how you could expect them to get anything that's convoluted at all,
Yeah, man, it's a serious thing. We just need to keep talking about it, I think, and getting complaining more. I think complaining helps sometimes.
I mean, there's just not enough repercussions for the judges, and I think one of the big things that could help out would be having those judges at least have like a post-fight interviews where they have to at least discuss some of those iffy decisions. Like, obviously, if the decisions went the way they should have gone, don't need to talk about those fights. But if there's a couple of fights that are a bit iffy, a couple of judges had it, because I think it's so crazy when one judge has it 20 or 30-27 to one guy, and then another judge has it 30-27 the other guy. Like, how does that even, like, you guys are like not even close to the same page. Like, did you just think that the guy with the red around his tape was the guy with the blue around the tape? Did you have it confused or something? So I think there should be at least a little bit of accountability, at least after the fights, to some of those decisions. Like, hey man, at least explain your decision. We can all watch it together, rewatching it and explaining why you made that decision, and then go from there, and then at least that'll keep them a little bit more accountable, because I'm sure it'd be embarrassing to have to replay one of the fights that is obviously for one guy, and you're trying to explain why you're giving it to the other guy. So at least something like that.
Yeah, that would be embarrassing, man, especially with the guy that they didn't make their whole paycheck because of you. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
Right in front of them.
I mean, like, and those ones were right. Like, they were split decisions. They went to the right guy, but those fights weren't split decisions. It should have been unanimous decisions. And so, like, even if like obviously sometimes the fight still goes the right way, but we've seen some of these horrible decisions where the fights go the wrong way because of some of these judges not, seemingly not watching the fights.
Now you'll be fighting in Denver, man, and of course everybody's gonna be talking about the elevation. Vegas, you guys do have mountains around the area. Have you been out there in the mountains training to get used to the elevation?
I don't necessarily focus too much on the elevation training. Vegas is one of those like things that like places where even though we don't have a bunch of elevation, the dry heat here can really take it out of you. And I've had probably it's always been the hardest to acclimate to Vegas weather than anywhere else. I've fought in Denver before. I fought Devontae Smith on kind of short notice in Denver. The fight was short, so I didn't really get to test my cardio in the fight, but I trained like the whole week up there, and the elevation really didn't bother me. And my cardio has always been one of my assets in fighting. And so, and I know C-Rod's coming from like Milwaukee or something, which is lower than even Vegas. So I think I'll have an advantage anyways in the cardio, which I always do. but I'm not gonna go anytime early. I'm just gonna go, when they fly me out on Tuesday, and like I did before with Devontae Smith, like when I was training that week to get the weight off, the elevation didn't bother me, so I'm not, anticipating it being a problem.
All right, and you always have a lot of training partners. Vegas is full of fighters, but who are the fighters or training partners that you work with for like specific details, ahead of a fight, especially this fight?
Yeah, we kind of have a small group of guys that that were all coached by Eric Nixick, and we got Aljo, Dan Ige, Cody Stamen, Natan Levy, me, Nicholas Mota, um, and a couple other guys that we have in a group that we all train on Wednesday mornings, and we really just kind of dissect upcoming fights and what we want to work on for whoever's got a fight coming up. And we have Kai Kamaka as well, who's fighting tonight on PFL, who's probably fighting right now actually. But we all really kind of just try to nail down those small details leading into fights. It's a practice that's all we do. It's not like we're just striking one day or grappling one day or you doing head movement or whatever it is. We're really just focused on the small details of how to win specific fights for everybody. So if Cody's got a fight, his last fight, we were helping him get ready with a southpaw, working open stance stuff. Um, me and Dan Ige had been really good partners for each other because he's fighting the week after me, and he was supposed to fight for a second. It was looking like he was going to fight Sean Woodson, and then now he's fighting Chepe. So I'm nothing like Chepe. So, but I was kind of like I'm tall, lanky, so I could give him a good look for the Sean Woodson fight. But we kind of, like I said, we kind of just try to nail those details down with that little group that we have on Wednesday mornings, and then try to utilize those things throughout the week as well.
You're like physically you're built a certain way, right? And you have like the shorter torso compared to most people, and like the really long limbs. Like, could you
Yeah.
explain the advantages of that? Because I would think like you're able to cover up better, protect the body, something like that. An example.
Yeah, one big advantage that I didn't really notice until later on in fighting was that my hip bones are unusually high. So people like sometimes try to go to the body and they punch my hip bones, and I've had people I had one guy break his hand on my hip before, and so and I always feel it like people will try to punch me to the body sometimes, and they punch a tad bit lower than they should, and they hit my hip bone. I can tell it bothers their hand. So yeah, like you said, my elbows kind of reach my hip bone, so I haven't really, I've never really been hit to the body to hurt me in a fight because of that. I have a small torso and long limbs, so to get into my body, you're kind of taking a risk of coming into something yourself. Especially with like elbows and knees and clenching and stuff like that. So uh, that's one of the big advantages of my body type is that it's really hard to hurt me to the body. Not to say that it's impossible, but it's a higher risk for guys to go to the body on me um, versus me going to the body on them, especially with my range. And so that's a good advantage for me. Obviously, having a smaller torso helps me make featherweight a bit easier as well because, some guys that are, I know guys that are, a lot shorter than I am, but they're just thicker, so they're harder to cut the weight. They have a lot more muscle around their midsection, so it's harder for them to cut the weight, and that's gives me the advantage of the height and the range as well. So, I mean, there's just like anything else, there's a bunch of advantages that I get, but there's also disadvantages as well. So I got to utilize my advantages and try to nullify my disadvantages.
How do you see this fight playing out against Christian Rodriguez? What do you envision for this one?
Yeah, kind of like most of my fights, I always kind of want to like take people into the third, like into the later on in the fight because I feel I have the advantage there because of my cardio. But Christian Rodriguez seems like a guy who has good cardio. I mean, Bulgarian kind of out wrestled him and out grappled him, but kind of gassed himself out doing that. I plan on kind of doing the same thing in a sense, just keeping the pace high, but not necessarily going for broke too soon. Like I want to elongate things, and I just want to beat him I want to beat him every minute for 15 minutes. And if if the finish presents itself to get the finish, I think my grappling's gonna be a bit better than his as well. So if I can dive on a front choke, Darce choke, guillotine, I think I can get him out of there pretty early. But I'm in it for the long haul for this one. I think he's a tough kid. He's a hard one to stop, I think, as well. But I have been known to stop people that haven't been stopped. Like when I fought Jourdain, Jourdain hadn't been finished until I finished him. So I know I have the ability to do so. Um, but I don't want to get too over anxious early on. I think he's a tough cookie, and he's a guy who can last 15 minutes. So I want to be able to stick in there for 15 minutes at the same pace.
Yeah, man, this is a really good matchup. July 13th, Denver, UFC Fight Night. Julian, thank you so much, man, for taking the time, and all the best in the fight. And yeah, man, hopefully you get 2 more this year. It looks like you're on pace for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking to fight July 13th and try to get another one, possibly in the fall time, and possibly another one in the winter time. I'm not too I'm not too like keen on like trying to completely schedule everything out. Nothing really matters to me until July after July 13th. Right now, I got to focus on this fight, and obviously plans change after the outcome of the fight. So I want to, whether I get injured or whether it's a 1 second knockout and I can move on like next weekend a fight. So I'll focus on July 13th. But if I can get out of that fight with a win and pretty unscathed, I would like to fight within a few months after that as well.
Nice, man. This is your 15th fight in the UFC, man. That's
Yes, sir.
that's a huge milestone, man, for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things which is just crazy because like out of my first 5 fights, my record in the UFC was 1-4, and I was on a 4-fight losing streak of the UFC. I had wins in between the UFC stints, but as a UFC fighter, I was 1-4 on a 4-fight losing streak. And to imagine now that I have 15 fights, or this will be my 15th fight, and I actually have an even record of 7-7, it's been something I had to really kind of claw myself out of that hole. And man, it was a point in time where I thought I was never going to be able to showcase my abilities on the big stage. And I'm just glad I've been able to do that. And I really just want to capitalize and parlay it and keep it going and just showcase the new stuff that I've been working on and that I do belong here.